Have you ever thought about going to Alaska and thought, man, that's a big subject? Well, you're right. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk in this video about the 5 regions in Alaska and what each one is known for. This video is just the first in a long series of videos about planning trips to Alaska. We'll talk about general information, we'll talk about accessibility information. But this video is an overview. If we're meeting for the first time, my name's Ken Edmonds, and on this channel I provide information including tips and tricks to help people that travel with disabilities enjoy their travels more, and also for their families and friends as well. So to put it in perspective, you'll notice the slide and it shows exactly how big Alaska is. When we impose Alaska over the lower 48, what we'll find is that Alaska would stretch from about Jacksonville, Florida, all the way to San Francisco, and then north from Florida all the way to Minnesota. So it really is a big area, and there's a lot to talk about in Alaska. It is literally one of the most amazing destinations on the planet. To make Alaska easier to digest, they typically divide Alaska into 5 sections. We have the Arctic, we have the interior, we have the Southwest, we have the South Central, and the Inside Passage. And those are, by consensus, the regions that they use when discussing Alaska, and in particular associated with tourism in Alaska. The Arctic's broken down into 3 regions. And basically in each of those 3 regions, you could say there's one population center. For example, the Arctic has Barrow, and it's the furthest northern point in the United States. And then we have the Arctic West, which has Nome. And then in the Brooks Range, there's the town of Coldfoot. And the Arctic in general is a land without roads, or very many roads. In fact, most of the shipping happens in the winter. If you've seen the TV show Ice Road Truckers, that's how they get it in. They wait till the ground freezes, the lakes freeze, and then they make roads on the ice to get into that area, because in the summertime it's basically a swamp and you can't drive through it. There's no easy way to get there. The Arctic's home to several large wildlife areas and parks. Some of those parks are as big as states in the lower 48. It's a great area if you want to go out and, I don't want to say get lost, but if you want some solitude and some peace and quiet. That'd be one of those things that the Arctic and the Brooks Range and the Arctic West are all known for, because there are these huge wildlife refuges that there's basically no way to drive into them. You know, you fly into a lake and then you can go off and enjoy real true solitude. You could probably spend weeks up there and not see another human, which is good and it could be bad depending on how bad you need some help. But anyway, so this region is really known for its wildlife, its fishing. It's home to polar bears, wolves, grizzly bears, black bears, a tremendous number of birds, and just all sorts of wildlife. And it is an amazing place. It is probably the least accessible of all the areas in Alaska as far as having facilities for those that travel with challenges in mobility. One thing the Arctic does have in the wintertime is great viewing of the northern lights. And it's the area where you can have either 24 hours of sunlight or 24 hours of mostly darkness. The farther north you go, the more pronounced those differences become. But if you wanted to go see the northern lights, the Arctic is a good choice. Like I said, it's just remote. A lot of the places you'd go to, you'd have to fly in to get there. And then the next area that we're going to talk about in Alaska is Southwest Alaska. Southwest Alaska is the widest part of Alaska because it includes the Aleutian Islands that extend like a string all the way into the Pacific Ocean towards Japan and Korea. And Southwest Alaska is really broken down into 6 smaller regions. We'll start on the farthest west, of course, is the Aleutian Islands, and this string of islands is basically very sparsely populated, with the exception of wildlife. Sea mammals find homes there. A lot of seabirds nest there in the summertime. So it's great for wildlife viewing. It's just desolate and hard to get to. While we're talking about islands in southwest Alaska, we want to include Pribilof Island. It's a small island group. Again, it's very remote, but great for wildlife viewing and great for fishing in the area around it. The question of the day is, have you ever thought about going to Alaska? Do me a favor, in the comments, please put an answer one way or the other. If you have any questions about Alaska, I'll try to answer them for you. Included in Southwest Alaska is the Kodiak Archipelago. And this is a collection of islands that sit south of the Alaska Peninsula, and again, home to great wildlife viewing. You've got to fly in to get there or go in a boat. It's not easily accessible. But again, great wildlife viewing, great fishing. It's a very picturesque area. If you're enjoying this content and getting some value out of it, do me a favor. Smash the like button. So the next area that we're going to talk about in Southwest Alaska would include the Alaska Peninsula, and that includes the towns of King Salmon and Dillingham's right on the border of that area. And again, this is an area now that starts to become much more accessible. You can drive from Anchorage out. If you have a vehicle, you can rent a vehicle, drive out from Anchorage. There are roads into there. Again, tremendous wildlife viewing and fishing, hunting if you're into hunting. So a great number of outdoor activities. And again, not much in the way of cities. We'll get to the areas that are more populated as we keep going in the video. But if you have the opportunity and have some time, it would be just an amazing place to go camping and go out and see all of the amazing things that are there. The next area in the Southwest Peninsula that we're going to talk about just real briefly is the area that's called Bristol Bay, and that includes Bristol Bay itself and a small segment of the Southwest Alaska coastline there. And again, great fishing, great canoeing, great hiking, great camping. Very remote area. Dillingham, like I said, is kind of on the edge of that. And then there's what's left is very, very sparsely populated, and good place if you want to go off and get lost and enjoy some solitude. Again, a great place to do that. And the final part of the Southwest Alaska area is known as the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. And again, very sparsely populated. It's where the Yukon and Kuskokwim rivers run into toward Bristol Bay. Great salmon fishery, just an amazing place again for water activity, for birding, for fishing, for hunting. And again, a fairly remote area. If you like to canoe and want to do long canoe trips, there's outfitters that'll help you go in there and do that. Again, that particular part of Alaska is not the most accessible, not for people that have mobility challenges. But if you're healthy and in good shape, you want to go do some backcountry exploration, it'd be a great choice to go. South Central Alaska includes the Kenai Peninsula, and the Kenai Peninsula is noted for its salmon fishing. There are tremendous runs of different kinds of salmon that make their way up the Kenai River and some of the other rivers that exist on the Kenai Peninsula. There's glaciers. There's just a lot to do on the Kenai Peninsula. You could spend a week there very easily or more without going anywhere else in Alaska. So that's an amazing place. There's also Prince William Sound, and Prince William Sound is typically the terminus of some of the northbound and southbound cruises that go to Alaska. In the town of Seward, we had the privilege of being in Seward last year. It's a gorgeous small town. They have the Alaska Sea Life Center there and quite a few other things. And we'll talk more about these places when I come back. It's a good place to go. This area in Alaska is a good place to go for glacier viewing, for wildlife, for fishing, And again, it is easily accessible because we have roads and trains and ways that people with mobility limitations can get around and start to see and do some things. Also in the south central region, you've got the Matsu Valley. There is a glacier there that you can basically drive very close to the terminus of it. It is the easiest glacier to drive to by car. There's a lot of glaciers in this area that are reasonably accessible, though I wouldn't say they're accessible like wheelchair accessible, but for people that are willing to walk a little ways, you can get up to the glacier, which is unusual because most glaciers, or at least a lot of the glaciers, terminate in places that are very hard to get to, but these are ones that are reasonably accessible. You also have Denali State Park, which is not in Denali National Park, but it's next to it. It offers good views, and again, there's a glacier there that you can drive up to. In this area, we also have the Copper River Valley. And the Copper River Valley has got huge wilderness areas, great fishing, it's got glaciers, it's got wildlife. Again, like most everywhere in Alaska, it's kind of hard to go to Alaska and not find a place where you can go fishing, go hunting, and see wildlife. It's just everywhere up there. But it's easily accessible out of Anchorage, which makes it, for people that want to fly up, makes it a lot easier. Fly up and rent a car and you can go see that area. Then we have the Anchorage area itself. And the Anchorage area is, Anchorage is the largest city in Alaska. It has, it's the most, let's say, metropolitan city in Alaska by a long ways. It's like a modern city in most places. But just a few short miles out of the city, you're in amazing countryside. A lot of people will fly into Anchorage, rent a car, and start to explore outward. And you could literally spend a week just exploring the area outside and around Anchorage without going very far. In this general region, in what we call South Central Alaska, there's a tremendous number of historic sites. There are there's a great number of parks and wildlife refuges. Again, it is just an amazing area to visit, and it's readily accessible. The next region we're going to talk about in Alaska is home to North America's highest peak, one of the tallest mountains in the world, and the one that everybody thinks about when they talk about Alaska, and that'd be Denali, or as it used to be known, Mount McKinley. And so that'd be we could say the linchpin of interior Alaska. Everybody thinks about Denali National Park. And that area you can reach by road from Anchorage. It's a long drive, but you can reach, or you can fly into Fairbanks. Or if you're really adventurous, the Alaska Highway terminates just outside of Fairbanks, and you can drive from the terminus of the Alaska Highway all the way in to Fairbanks from the lower 48. It's a long, long, long drive. But if you've got the time, it's also an amazing trip. Interior Alaska is also broken down into 5 subsections. You have the western interior, you have the northern interior, you have the Alaska Highway, you have Denali, and Denali, of course, like I said, is the national park that around the mountain. It is amazing. You can see Denali from a lot of different places in Alaska because it stands so tall. It's easily seen both over in the South Central. We talked about there's a state park called Denali State Park that you can actually see Denali from. You can see it from Fairbanks, and it's very much a highly desired tourist attraction. A lot of people. There are a total of 5 subregions, including Denali, Fairbanks, the Alaska Highway, the Northeast Interior, and the Western Interior. And the Western Interior, the Northeastern Interior are primarily, again, wide open space, not a lot in the way of population. The Yukon River flows through those areas, but it's, again, small villages and mostly not accessible by road. The Alaska Highway is aptly named because the Alaska Highway actually terminates south of Fairbanks in that area, and then you change to the Richardson highways to go on all the rest of the way in to Fairbanks. Again, these areas where they're accessible by road are great places for any kind of outdoor activity that you want to do, really. If you'd like to see more videos like this, you'll need to subscribe. Like I said, this Alaska is going to be a multi-part series in planning different kinds of trips to Alaska. And Fairbanks itself is the second largest city in Alaska, in the metropolitan area. You have a bunch of smaller communities that are all clustered right around Fairbanks that are included, but it's still a very, very small city. It's probably one of the favorite destinations, though, for people that want easy access and a chance to see the Northern Lights. Starting in October and carrying on into April, you have fairly good odds of being able to see the Northern Lights because you have very long nights. Obviously, you can't guarantee that it'll happen on a certain night, but the odds are pretty good that you'll have a chance to see the Northern Lights if you spend some time in the Fairbanks area during the winter. Now, the last section of Alaska that we're going to talk about is the Inside Passage, and this is one of the most visited parts of Alaska because the cruise lines bring as many as 2 million visitors during the course of a cruise season to different ports within that area. The Inside Passage again is broken down into 3 separate areas. You have the northern area, you have the Glacier Bay, which is kind of carved out of that northern section, and it's treated as a separate region because it's a national monument, so there's basically no settlement in there, no easy access. In fact, you have to visit by ship, and there's a limited number of ships that are able to sail into Glacier Bay. In the northern region, you have some amazing destinations there, and we're going to touch just briefly on them in a later video. We'll go into each one in depth. In fact, each one will probably wind up with its own video because there is so much history, there is so much to talk about in each of these destinations. And we'll come back and do the same for a lot of the interior places as well. This is instead of just a summary video. So in the northern region, there are several notable destinations that again primarily have to be reached by water. Some of them are available by land, but it's an arduous trip to get to them. You've got Skagway, for example. The highway goes up into the Yukon Territory. It's an amazing drive. Skagway has some very interesting history to it. The area just outside of Skagway was featured in an old John Wayne movie, North to Alaska, and North to the Yukon Zone. That was a song by Johnny Horton as well. You've got Sitka, where was a Russian base when the Alaska was part of Russia before we bought Alaska from the Russians. So there's some interesting history there. You've got Haines, which is noted for its eagle viewing and for wildlife. You have Juneau and Icy Strait Point, which are fairly new additions to cruise itineraries. Again, a very interesting little port to stop at. Great whale watching and fishing. Interesting thing about a lot of the villages and towns that make up the Inside Passage, you can only reach them in many cases via the water, so ferry, private boat, or via a cruise line. There's just no other way. A lot of them are on islands. There's no bridges to get there. Some of them have even very, very small road areas, 5, 10, 15 miles worth of road in the whole town. So again, it's an interesting area. It's well worth a visit. As with so much of Alaska, there is so much more to talk about. In our next video, we're going to talk about the starting stages of planning a trip. Haven't decided yet what kind of trip we're going to plan for sure. I got an idea, but we'll talk about that in our next video. We'll see you then.